We will be looking at two different features that allow you to duplicate views using Naviate. Both of these features are located within the Sheets and Views tab of Naviate Accelerate. First, we'll go to the Sheets and Views tab. We're going to be looking at the Quick Dependent View feature, which allows you to create dependent views for each scope box visible in your floor plan with a single click. Or alternatively, you could pre-select either scope boxes, 3D zones, or filled regions to create dependent views from. Then we will look at the Duplicate Views feature. This feature allows you to duplicate views by selecting scope boxes or an existing dependent view setup on multiple views at once. First, let's take a look at the Quick Dependent Views, which is in a drop-down with the Create Views feature. So in this view, I have a series of scope boxes. The first way to use this feature is without pre-selection. This will automatically create dependent views of all visible scope boxes in the view. See how in one instance, it will create a dependent view of all of the scope boxes in my view and apply that scope box to all the dependent views. Alternatively, if we don't want it to create dependent views of all scope boxes, we have a few options. One is we could select only the scope boxes we want to create dependent views for. This will allow us to then run the command, and it'll only create dependent views of our pre-selected scope boxes. The second option for pre-selection is being able to pre-select filled regions. So I can also draw a filled region of the area I want to create dependent views for and run the Quick Dependent Views feature, and it'll create dependent views of those selected filled regions. And the third option is to utilize a 3D zone. So I can create a 3D zone using Naviate Accelerate's Create 3D Zone features or Naviate Architecture's 3D Zones from Areas feature. After creating this 3D zone, I can pre-select this 3D zone and run the Quick Dependent Views, and it'll create a dependent view of all 3D zones that I've created. And that is how we use the Naviate Quick Dependent Views feature. Next, let's take a look at the Duplicate Views feature. The Duplicate Views feature allows you to duplicate views by selecting scope boxes or an existing dependent view setup. So if I already have a series of dependent views tied to a plan, I can duplicate this setup to other views. At the top left, we can toggle between duplicating by scope box and options and duplicating views from existing setup. Let's first look at duplicating views from existing setup. This will allow us to select which setup we want. So I can come in here and find that setup that I already have. And then I can come in and select the views I want to duplicate this setup to. We can then specify a naming convention, and we can modify this by adding parameters, adding text, or removing any of the information. So I'm going to have it set up with the original name dash the scope box name. By hitting apply, it would apply these settings, and we can preview it below in the data grid. So here I can see all of the views that it's going to be creating, the existing setup view it's duplicating from, the view it's duplicating, the duplication type, the option, so it's duplicating as dependent, and the scope box being applied. If I'm happy with this setup, I can simply hit duplicate views. If I would like to make any changes, I have two options. I can make the changes and then hit apply, which will remove anything in the data grid I have and apply any changes I've made, as you can see here. Alternatively, I could select to append. If I had views that I've already set up in my data grid, like so, and I wanted to add a few more, I could simply hit append. So instead of deleting what was previously in the data grid, it will add to it. Now that I have all the views that I want to create, I can hit duplicate views, and we can see that that existing setup was duplicated to the views I selected. Next, let's take a look at the other option of duplicating by scope box and options. First, we can select our duplicate option. Do we want to duplicate, duplicate with detailing, or duplicate as dependent? Then I can select the scope boxes that I want to create that duplication for. Then select the parent views that I'm duplicating from. And then we have the same options as before to specify our naming convention and hit apply or append to fill out our data grid. We'll be able to see all the information, the view name, the existing setup, the view to duplicate, the duplication type, the duplication option, and the scope box. Again, just like previously, we can make any changes and then hit apply or append. If I'm happy with what I have in the data grid, I can simply hit duplicate views and it will duplicate the views I need. And that is everything you need to know about the quick dependent view and duplicate views features.